So about 10 years ago, I was having a extremely hard time in my life, and I was 17 years old, and I was surrounded with people who used drugs, who drank, I smoke, and I was indulged in substances, and I was absolutely heartbroken. I was nowhere close to where I am right now, and it was a very dark period in my life where I found out and discovered this thing called The Secret. And it had just been launched, the documentary and the book. And my mother introduced me to it as a way to get me out of the space that I was in. And I watched the documentary, The Secret, and it completely shifted my perspective of how to use my mind to achieve my goals. And I actually, because in the movie that they say to watch the movie over and over again, I actually started to watch it every single day, and I watched it about 22 or 23 times, so that the lessons from that movie get so ingrained in my mind that it kind of becomes like a program. And I had extreme negative thoughts about future. Whenever I would project a future for myself, all I would have would be negative thoughts. Kind of like in the movie Joker, he says to his therapist, all I have is negative thoughts. And I started to change one thought at a time. Every negative thought, I tried to convert it into a positive thought. They asked me to make a list of my goals. What do I want? I started to write that down, and I actually started to cut out pictures of the things I want, and I created what they called a vision board. And in that vision board, I put pictures of cars, I put pictures of women, travel destinations, houses, and a whole bunch of things that I had my whole room surrounded by pictures of my dreams. And this was at the age of 17. Then in the night, I would wake up, I couldn't sleep, so I would take a notebook and I would start writing all my goals. The countries that I wanted to travel, the cars I wanted to drive, the types of women that I wanted to date, my health goals and family goals, and all of those things. And at the age of 17, I was stuck in my mother's house, and she was making about $1,500 to $2,000, in which me, her, and my brother would be living and surviving in this little house that we had in New Delhi. And from there, I still remember that from that time, over a decade later now, almost all of those things have happened. I have traveled to most of the places I wrote down. And actually, one of the most toughest goals that I wrote down in that book was to quit smoking, alcohol, and substances. Now, this is something that I didn't even know anybody who was that clean. Probably one person in my whole circle that I knew who didn't smoke, who didn't drink. Everybody in my family smoked or drank. Every man in my family smoked or drank. And this is something that I was like, a lot of successful people, a lot of celebrities who have a lot of money, they can afford any therapist, any rehab that there is, but even they have such a hard time quitting smoking and drinking. And even if they quit, they're very miserable, and they're not fully happy, and they just don't go back to living in an enjoyable manner, kind of like how they would when they were drinking and smoking. And that's one of the goals that I thought was extremely difficult, because a lot of the people, even with money, were not able to achieve this. So I was like, if this happens, then it's going to be a really big win. And within 2 years, I quit smoking, I quit drinking, as I had imagined and thought about, and everything in my life changed. Now, I know in that, and from there, I started to find mentors, coaches. I started to do yoga, meditation, I calmed my mind down and I started to accomplish all my goals in all areas of life. Now, I don't actually think that the universe, as they say, makes it happen. I don't actually believe that there is a universe that's listening to everything that you're saying and then it makes it happen. I really think that it's your mind, your own mind. And mind, because it's such a powerful tool, if you constantly think about negative thoughts, then consciously or subconsciously, body takes instructions from the mind. And if you're constantly thinking about those thoughts, then your body might unconsciously act in that direction. And you might find yourself taking decisions and direction in a negative direction, in a negative pathway. And that's what I think happened to me, is that I consciously controlled what happened and what types of thoughts I allowed in my mind, and I consciously created what I wanted to see in my future. And consciously or unconsciously, I started to find mentors. I started to find references to books that I could read, people, and I started to tune into a frequency that I wasn't tuned in. And eventually, things weren't handed in my hands as it was said in the movies, but I made it happen, consciously or unconsciously. And some of the things that happened, I can tell you exactly how I did it, but some of the things I kind of took decisions unconsciously and I landed up at the right place at the right time. But I don't think it was a coincidence. I don't think it was the universe, as they say in the movie or the book. I really think it was my own mind that made it happen. So if you're someone who is struggling with a very dark period in your life and you don't have any direction, I highly recommend watching this movie and reading the book. But I want you to take it with a grain of salt, because when they refer to universe, I want you to reframe that as your own mind. And whatever the mind can conceive, it can achieve. And some of the examples of extremely successful people that have been influenced by this work has been Jim Carrey, Oprah Winfrey, Steve Harvey. I mean, Steve Harvey has a whole vision board on his phone, and he's worth a couple of $100 million. And the only type of people that I have seen criticize this movie are poor people. I haven't found anyone who had accomplished something in their own life from scratch that talked shit about this movie. Not this movie, but this concept of visualization and the power of visualization. Not only that, I started to validate this when I met the man who was worth around 500 million pounds. And I asked him the question, because he was from a very poor background. He actually grew up in refugee camps in the UK because of war. His whole family was displaced and he was living in a refugee camp. He was an Indian refugee based in UK, and he amassed a wealth of 500 million pounds. And recently on his WhatsApp, he had a picture of himself when he was poor, and he was maybe working in a garage, and he had grease on his shirt, and you could see on his face that how poor this kid was. And after 30-40 years time, he was sitting in $100 million mansion. And when I visited this mansion, I asked him, did you see all of this in your mind? And without any hesitation, even without doing any or ah, he said, yes, I did. Yes, of course. He had this tone in his voice that, yes, of course, I saw it. I saw all of these things before they actually happened. And that's the power of the mind. And that's how incredible this thing is, the mind, that when you start to think about it over and over, your whole mind starts getting programmed, and then your body follows. And then you find yourself consciously or unconsciously making decisions that move you in that direction. Now, it's also true that if you think negative, then that also tends to happen pretty fast. And if you start thinking about an accident, you may find yourself in one. You may unconsciously make choices that make you end up in that place, and it's all cause and effect over a long period of time, and then we call that thing destiny. So it's a video. This video is about mindset and how to take care of your mind and your mental space, and I highly recommend reading and watching that movie documentary a few times, and for you to write down your goals, to create a vision board, and so that you have your mind always aligned and anchored with your vision. And sometimes it's very hard to keep that picture alive in the mind, because if you're having too many negative situations all around you, you may be bogged down, completely drowning in those situations, and you may lose the sight of your vision. But if you have it on the wall, if you have it all around you, you can have that foresight and you can be anchored mentally to what you really want. Because we tend to forget what we want and we tend to get lost with what's happening around us. So it's good to have that mental picture always, and be in touch with your vision and keeping the vision alive. So that's today's video, and I will talk to you soon.